Braintree Council lost their appeal against the government. They didn't want these male migrants to be housed at the RAF airfield in Essex, but no. They said no, and it is indeed going to happen. 1,700 men at Wethersfield airfield. Now, joining me down the line to get into this story, because, of course, you'll be familiar with the fact that it's 7 years to the day that we voted for Brexit. Sir, former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib is here with me tonight. Ben, good evening. You and I and millions of us, we voted Brexit, and one of the reasons for many people was to get control of our borders. When we sit here and we have record numbers of people crossing the channel, we have net migration of over 600,000 people, increasing the population. People say it's out of control. When we hear stories like this one tonight, 1,700 men to be housed in a base like this, I think the world is going mad. I think this is the exact opposite of what we voted for. Your thoughts?
Well, I couldn't agree more. Central to the case for Brexit, championed by Boris Johnson and laid out very clearly in the Conservative Party manifesto of the 2019 general election, was taking back control, amongst other things, of our borders. And what does it mean to be sovereign if you can't control your border? And I'm afraid that the government simply hasn't understood that border control starts at the entry into British territorial waters of these boats. You can't exercise border control, as they've sought to do, through ever more complex deportation schemes and domestic laws designed to fight the problem once the problem lands on your shores. Actually, we already possess all the international law we need on our side to stop those boats entering our waters. And before, the inevitable pushback about this being a humanitarian crisis, they're coming from war-torn countries, we need to take a sort of very magnanimous, welcoming view of them. Don't forget these people are coming from France. They're already safe. There's no threat to their human rights in France, not that I'm aware of anyway. And so, we've just got to take control of our borders. And as I mentioned, we have all the international laws on our side. And unless we do that, Michelle, we're going to see much more of this. Rural communities, this is deeply rural countryside. We're going to see rural communities with these people brought into it. They're not going to be policed. They're not being locked up, remember. They'll be free to, go and come as they please. And that's going to damage the country. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's going to damage the country.
Yeah, of course. And it's not just this airfield either. I mean, there's other ones. We've discussed it at length. The one in Lincolnshire, the former home of the Dam Busters, for example, imminently set to receive their first, I think it's 250 initially, going up to about 1,800, 2,000 people. And I worry if I was living in those areas. I mean, you're just going to have these people for up to 6 months, the one in Essex. They can't work. They've got nothing to do. And I mean, who thinks that this is... I'm almost lost for words as to who, Ben, would think that this was a good, safe, logical thing to do.
We tend to see this through the cost of housing these people. And of course, that's a really important way to look at it. But there is, as we just touched on, the social fabric implications of taking men whom we don't know the origins of, who we know nothing about in terms of their background, their values, their views about the United Kingdom and what their intent is while they're here, and just dumping them into rural communities where there's bound to be division. You can't blame the communities if they're not happy about it. And obviously Braintree Council here sought an injunction against it, and bizarrely, the High Court judge decided he didn't have the legal authority to grant that injunction. He didn't even hear the case. He just said he didn't have the legal authority. So they appealed it to the appeals court, and the appeals court sustained the High Court's initial judgment. And, where do communities go if they have this kind of top-down enforcement of 1,700 people in this case, and thousands elsewhere, of people they just simply do not know, cannot understand their backgrounds, can't legislate for what they might do while they're in those local communities. It's just bad, bad, bad. And, when you were in your opening comments, Michelle, you mentioned this being Veterans Week. Well, there are 16,000 veterans sleeping rough. You know, we don't give them this kind of priority. I'd much rather have them in an airfield than I would, these people of whom we know nothing.
And Ben, there'll be some people listening to this, my final question, and they'll say, pack it in, you guys, you're fear-mongering, you're projecting that these people are somehow dangerous people when they're not, they're just desperate people. What would you say back to that criticism?
Well, it's a fundamentally philosophically unsound comment to make. No one can equally argue that they're not dangerous and accuse us of unfairly accusing them of being dangerous. You know, you can't have both things. The point is, the reason we have border control, the reason we require visas, is so that we can ensure that people aren't dangerous, that they don't have malintent, that they aren't criminals coming into our country. And I'm afraid it's a complete collapse in political will that we're not prepared to see that through into the actual control of our borders.